welcome back to Sell More Academy, everyone. My name is Ben McGary, and for the last 2 decades, I have spent nearly every day trying to figure out how to sell more stuff. I've been in the trenches selling my own products and services for years. I built teams, companies, and systems that sell from Main Street, small town USA, all the way to Wall Street. And I've been fortunate enough to coach and consult for countless others worldwide, all in totaling over $150 million in sales. During that time, it has become painfully obvious that the marketplace is and always will be loud and noisy. These days, content creators and social media gurus promote clickbait tactics and short-sighted strategies that often cause more harm than good. It seems like everyone has all the tools at their fingertips these days, but nobody really knows how to put it all together. Plus, what worked yesterday might not work today and will almost certainly be different again by tomorrow. And that's precisely why I started Sell More Academy, to build a community and a set of resources to help you stay ahead of the curve, to help cut through the noise and make sense of your next best step. At Sell More Academy, we focus on what we consider to be the 5 pillars of modern business success: AI, branding, marketing, sales, and systems. We bring this to you through a powerful combination of a vibrant mastermind community where you can connect with and learn from fellow high achievers and experts in the field, live masterclasses just like this one, where we dive deep into the strategies and tactics for each pillar, covering one per day, a curated collection of resources, including free tools that we're building to help you sell more effectively, and our Sell More directory, connecting you with the pre-vetted providers and solutions that you'll need when it's time to either outsource or just find the right tool for the job. Our goal here is to provide you with everything that you need to not only stay informed and competitive, but to sell a lot more stuff. And that brings us to today's masterclass, where we're diving into sales and conversions. I'm super excited to introduce today's special guest, Brooke Trometer. Brooke is the founder of Cypress Media Productions and the creator of the Mic to Money method, a system that has helped countless professionals, including a family law attorney who expanded his practice into neighboring counties, to turn their expertise into a reliable stream of high-value clients and referrals. She has a unique approach to sales that flips the traditional model on its head. Instead of chasing clients, she teaches you how to build authority and create compliant clients who are already 99% sold before they even get on a call with you. Her Conversations Convert framework is designed to turn every interaction into a strategic opportunity for business growth. Mastering this approach means that you can stop the endless cycle of chasing leads and start attracting clients who value your expertise and are ready to invest in your services. It's about building a business on a foundation of authority and authentic connection, not just sales pressure. In this session, you're going to learn how to build your authority, have strategic conversations that convert, and create a system that consistently brings you your ideal clients. You should leave here with a very clear understanding of how to implement authority-based selling into your own business. This is exactly the type of tactical, results-driven expertise that our members at Sell More Academy need, and that I'm excited to learn from you. So with that, I would like to officially welcome to Sell More Academy, Brooke Trometer. Brooke, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you actually facilitating this and getting it all set up. I'm so honored and grateful that you're here. Could you maybe take a few minutes and just fill us in a little bit on your journey, where you came from, what's going on now, and basically clean up anything that I might have missed along the way?
Oh yeah, no, thank you for having me. And yeah, no, you kind of like hit the nail on the head right there. That was a really good introduction. I think I'm gonna have to steal that from you so I can like just like paste that over to like other
There you go.
areas. That was really good. No, so yeah, my background initially comes a lot in education. That was where I initially started. And I kind of ended up into the podcasting world out of necessity. And I came into that realm just because I needed more of a remote job. I homeschool my kids, and I needed to be able to be home more. And so I kind of got into this and I started learning that, like, I started seeing what people were doing with their podcasting. And I'm like, man, there's so much more that could be done with this. And I was running operations, doing post-production work for a post-production house. And one of the things that I kept hearing people say all the time with doing this was like, man, I feel like I'm putting all of this money and time into doing these podcasts and like I'm not building an audience. I'm not making anything off of it. I feel like I'm just talking for the sake of talking, like it's an expensive hobby,
Yeah.
you know? And the more that I got involved in it and the more that I, was, I talked to a couple of clients and I started kind of like picking their brain at one point after the company that I work for kind of like shut down overnight. And it was just like, it just totally went away. And overnight, I didn't have anything. I had no income, no company to work for, nothing. And I was calling clients and everything. And I had a few of them say, well, we liked working with you anyway. So if you start your own company, we'll just stay with you. So I started asking them, what do you wish you had had? What did you wish that you had learned? What did you, what are things that you wished you could do with this that you're not able to or that you haven't figured out? And I started building all of this based on what they were telling me. So every bit of this that I had started building was based off of client feedback and based off of human psychology. So by blending the two things together, that's kind of where we came up with this. And it has been highly, highly successful, pulling people in, hundreds of thousands of dollars into their company. So yeah. So
That's
that's kind of,
awesome.
yeah.
What before we jump in, what did you said you were in education? Were you a
Yeah.
teacher?
Yeah, so I did. I had been working with, I did a lot of private tutoring and working with kids with learning disabilities and things like that prior.
Yeah.
Just before I got into podcasting, I had been pulled into a teen human trafficking safe house organization. When the girls are brought in, they're kind of tucked away. They have to be pulled away from the internet, from society, hidden, and they needed a way to educate them and, have that because they all come at different levels. When abuse starts, that's where the education gaps start happening.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like Swiss cheese as far as their education goes. So no girl came in at the same level. So I had to come in and build a system and build a way for them to kind of fill in those gaps and get them caught up as much as we could. And it turned out, that turned out really well. So
Like
yeah.
a theme of understanding is already starting to emerge. I like that. So let's dive in here because I'm so excited to learn more about now that I know where it came from. I really want to learn more about your philosophy.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, it's a bit of a paradox here. It's not about being a pushy salesperson.
Mhm.
I think pretty much everybody can tell if they run into a pushy salesperson right away. Obviously, I'm not talking to one, or we would already know that. Uh, but when you're not being pushy, you can actually attract more clients. And I really like how you have that. But could you maybe unpack it a little bit and explain how your approach to authority-based selling is a little different from what a traditional sales approach might look like?
Yeah. So what I found is that with most of the traditional sales models, they're built around a lot of persuasion. And one thing that, first off, a lot of us get into business, like even myself, and I know a lot of my clients, because I work with a lot of high ticket professionals, so attorneys, doctors, coaches, consultants, advisors, things like that. They get into business because they like what they do. They like that part of it. They don't want to spend their time trying to twist people's arms into buying their service, right? They don't want to like force themselves down people's throats. And if they're having to spend half their time trying to convince people to use them, one of the things that you find, especially in high ticket sales like that, is that if you had to like persuade them on the call, get them to buy under pressure, um, and kind of in that super emotional space, then you are constantly in that same frame of mind with them the entire time you're working with them because they never built that really solid trust with you to enter into that relationship with that in mind that yes, I trust that you know what you're doing and I trust that you're going to be able to give that to me, that you're the right person for me. They did it almost under a duress, you know?
Sure.
So the whole time they're going through, you're constantly re-persuading them that what you're doing is the right way to do it. And that's not fun for the client, and that is not fun for the person, for the person that is doing it. So they're built around a lot of persuasion, and you know, you generate the interest, you get someone on a call, and then it's just convincing them to move forward. When you're doing this on kind of the authority-based selling, it shifts that part of it to way earlier in the process. So instead of persuading somebody during a call, you've already positioned yourself publicly in a way that this client or this potential client has already seen you. They've already built trust with you um, by either listening to what you've had to say. And when I'm talking about like some of this content that you're going to put on social media, you touched on that a little bit when you were giving your intro there about like people doing clickbait and stuff. And that's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about content. I'm talking about people putting out content that shows how they think, how they work through problems, how they, why they believe what they believe, how they work with clients, how they kind of maneuver through all of the, whatever the topic is, whatever the thing is. So you're naturally filtering out the people who are not aligned with you in the first place, right? So the people that are aligned with you, they're looking at you and they're like, I get that. That spoke to me. That's exactly what I need. That's the person I relate to them, that I feel a connection with this person. And it almost becomes like a parasocial relationship through this. And so by the time they call you, they now believe that you have what they need. They're already sold on you. They just need a little bit of clarity from you. That call becomes about clarity more than persuasion, right? So it filters out the people to where you're getting the right people coming into those conversations rather than having to do all of that convincing on the call. All of that's done before you ever have to have the call with the person. So when someone books that call, they're not asking, should I trust you? They're just asking if like, hey, let me get a little bit of clarity. Let me run my particular situation by you and just make sure we want to make sure it's the right fit, right? And that changes the dynamic and it becomes, like I said, more about clarification than convincing. And so it's not, a lot of people say it's like anti-sales, but it's not that it's anti-sales, it's just anti-pressure, right?
Sure.
And when authority gets established properly, then the selling just becomes a natural next step rather than having to come in almost like a performance, you know?
Yeah,
So,
that
yeah.
makes sense. So one of our kind of core tenets, and we talked about this slightly, is that we believe that trust kills sales.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really glad that you gave that explanation because I actually think that we're 100% aligned on this. It might be a semantics difference.
Mm-hmm.
My belief set, and I'm telling you this just not to say it because I want to
Mm-hmm.
hear your feedback on it. Um, my belief set and kind of the way that we operate here is the idea that trust is probably the weakest part of business in general. And that's the reason why is because there's so many things, it's so fragile. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
things that can break it that if we build a business or build a relationship on trust, we're really not building on a solid foundation. And so what you do is exactly what we encourage. It's to actually put your stuff out there. Don't make them believe in you, which is kind of the high pressure, the way I look at it, right? If somebody's high pressuring you into something, they're trying to convince you to trust them, to believe them instead of experiencing truth with them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of split it into those two things. And it's almost, to me, when you were describing this, as I was kind of imagining, it's almost like instead of being a salesperson, this isn't just a sales conversation. This kind
Mm-hmm.
of starts to make the move into better prospecting and then even into the marketing side. Because the marketers
Mm-hmm.
know, put the information out there, right? But that's not a
Mm-hmm.
conversation that salespeople ever have. It's like hold the cards close to your chest and then use them when you need them type thing.
Right.
So that's kind of the way that we look at trust is more of a deceptive, manipulative tool to get somebody to believe in you and move forward instead of showing them the truth. But again, I
Mm-hmm.
think that might be a semantics issue here between based
Yeah.
on the way you said it. So
Yep.
how do you think about that and how our approach is are we going in the right direction or do you think that maybe we're taking the wrong stance?
No, I think like you said, I think it's more of a semantics type situation. Because from what you're explaining, I don't think that you're talking about like somebody that's just doing like a flat out like cold call and then well, you don't know who I am. I don't care if you trust me, now pay me.
Yeah,
Kind of situation, you know. So you're not talking about like that. I still think that you're with the idea that like there has to be a semblance of trust that comes in, but you're not trying to convince them that they need to trust you. You're convincing them that they need to trust that process,
sure.
that is the piece, right? And I think that there's also a difference in the psychology between kind of like those short sales cycles and those long sales cycles too. With ones that are more transactional versus um, ones that are more relationship driven,
Sure.
right? And so there's going to be a difference in which, in the way that you approach something that's going to be more of that short cycle that's going to have that high volume model where it is the $99 product, the $100 product, where, somebody's trust level can be lower. I'm going to be more willing to gamble a small amount of money on something, that I don't know you. I'm not really sure about your process. But it sounds like it might be something that I need. I'll be willing to gamble a few $100s. I'm not willing to put that much faith into somebody that I haven't heard how they think quite a bit, in depth. I haven't, following. I'm not talking about like tons of like one-on-one conversations like this, right?
Sure.
But if I haven't been able to really see how they think, how they work through problems, how they kind of operate under pressure, you know, how all of that kind of stuff, I'm not going to just willy-nilly toss out a $15,000 high ticket,
Yeah.
payment to
I agree.
somebody the same way that I would be willing to pay somebody $99 for something.
Sure.
So I think it really depends on the level of trust that's necessary and the way in which you're going to approach that relationship for that particular sale is going to be different depending on, is it something that's going to be a low ticket offer? Or are we talking high tip ticket relationship driven sales? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, and I think this part probably is something we could talk for hours on, specifically because I think we're very close to being super aligned on this, and I
Mhm.
just think that you kind of said something there about faith, and so right, if we try to not get myself too off pace here, but I love philosophy. And
Mhm.
so one of the earliest branches of philosophy is epistemology, and it's the difference between what we know and what we believe. And
Mhm.
so belief and trust and faith are all in the same bucket. They're the same name for the same thing. And so my idea of this, and it's exactly the note that I wrote down when you were explaining it, is your method simplified to me is show, don't tell. And
Mhm.
that is to me truth versus trust. It's showing you
Mhm.
that I know what I'm talking about instead of
Mhm.
convincing you that I could do the job or that I
Yeah.
could deliver the result or
Yeah.
whatever the case. And I think so much of sales has been conditioned to manipulate that trust factor as opposed to just showing you the fact that not only do I know what I'm doing, I've done it. Like you
Mhm.
said, this is how I work through it. This is the process, whatever the case. I'm from Missouri originally. This is the
Yeah.
show me state kind of thing,
Oh,
right?
yeah, there
It's
you
a
go.
show
Yeah.
not tell kind of thing.
Yeah.
So again, I think
Yeah.
we're really, really aligned. It is
Yeah.
probably just the differences in the way that, we name it, but I love your approach. Just flat out love it. I think that it's going upstream and I think that it's brilliant. And I'm curious, how does this tie into the compliant client side of things? The people who are already 99% sold, right? What is that situation like when they come in? What are they expecting and how do you handle that? And then would be some of maybe the key steps that people could take to actually like build that type of authority or credibility to attract those type of clients?
Yeah. So when I talk about that, we're talking about clients that are 99% already decided before they get on the call with you. And what that really is kind of saying is that they've already seen that the alignment is there. And because that alignment is there, they already are kind of like, yes, this is the person I want. I see this, I understand them. I agree with this, and this. It's kind of already this pre-qualification that's already happened out here that you didn't even really have to be involved in, right? Um, so that happens first. And the when that it's happening through three things. So you're having kind of that clarity of your positioning. So if your message is vague, you're going to attract vague prospects, right? So you have to be really specific about the things that you're talking about. Because what do they say? If you're talking about everything, then you're talking to no one, right? So be specific. And I think another thing too is that people, when they're talking, when they're making content, when they're putting it out there, and when we're saying making content, it could be reels, podcasts, the emails you're putting out, your blogs, your newsletters, whatever it is that is your way of getting in front of your potential clients, right? Whatever that is, whatever you're using to get your message out there, you can't put a message out there trying to design it to attract everyone or to appease everyone, right? Because that's not going to get that compliant client per se, right? Um, the concept behind that compliant client is that they come in, they already know that you have what they need. They have, they're already like, yes, I see this is going to fit into what I'm doing right over here. I want this done. I want this in my company. They come in, they get on the call with you, and they're just like, okay, can I pay you now?
Yeah. How do we get started?
How do we get started? That's the conversation, is how do we get started? And then they say, this is what I have. This is my company. How do we get started? How do we set this up into my company? And that becomes the conversation. They've already deemed you as the authority in this. They've already decided they like your frameworks. They've already decided this is what they need prior to talking to you. So you're, again, clarity of positioning, consistent visibility. So you have to be out there. You have to be in front. Like Google did their study too, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with. You have to have so many touch points across so many different platforms for so many different, hours.
Yeah.
So you have to have that visibility out there. You have to stay consistent. They need the repeated exposure before they're going to feel confident in working with you, right? And then having that strategic proof in place. So not just testimonials, but that visible demonstrations of how you think and how you're solving those problems. And that's kind of alludes back to what we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
So when all of those elements are kind of in place, that sales call just becomes the final checkpoint. It just becomes the, hey, all right, how do we get this started? But
Yeah.
all of that comes between making sure your position is clear. It is clear. Don't try to talk to everyone. Talk to your avatar, the person you're trying to deal with. Um, Talk to them frequently. Be out there and talk. Don't just give tips and tricks. Talk through it. Be strategic. Why do you think the way you do? That's how you're going to build that authority. And that's what's going to make people see you stand out and be different than the person that's just over here of like their quick little three tricks to be able to do whatever with? So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I see that.
That makes so much sense. I like you said basically any medium, or I know podcasts are something that you really like. What are some other mediums that this works really, really well on?
Yeah, so I think the one thing that has been said, and we always put this with our podcast too, with my particular clients, we don't just do the podcast work. We also take and write a blog for every show. Okay. I really believe that blogs are really good for this. If you can take this or even kind of take that blog and put it into a newsletter or attach it to your email marketing, something along those lines with it, because the top 5% that spend the most money tend to read more than they tend to listen or watch something. So reading, the people that you catch that are coming to you from reading more long form are going to be the people who are willing to spend more money. So,
Yeah, I could co-sign that all day long. If anybody ever goes to my website, I built thousands of websites that are beautiful that people like, and then my site is the most boring site because if you won't read it, you won't work with me, and it's
yeah,
that simple. So I
yeah,
agree completely. It becomes the longer form, and particularly in writing, almost immediately starts to become a filter for you,
yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
self-selecting filter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's not to say that the video won't do well. We do the same
No.
thing. We take the
Yep.
video, we put the video in our private community, we post blogs, newsletters, send emails about it, do all the things, and it's because we're trying to hit the right people at the right place. So I agree
Right.
completely with that
Well, you
part.
have to get multiple points of where you're going to try to draw them in to get to these other areas you want them in, right? And it just ends up being an additional medium for them to get those touch points with you on.
That makes sense.
So,
Yeah, it makes me think a little bit on the marketing side. There's kind of two schools of thought, and it's one that you can attribute everything properly, and then there's the other that attribution is a fallacy. It's a joke anyway, because you don't know what billboard made them pull over
yeah.
and say that that was the one, or you don't know what email or podcast or reel or whatever was the
Yep.
one that actually got them, and which
Yep.
one, how many of the 7 to 12 touch points came before that. And so when we try in marketing, I know this isn't a marketing call, it's a different
Yeah.
day, but when we try in marketing to figure out that specific attribution, we oftentimes lose the rest of it that you're explaining, the fact that we need to kind of not necessarily be absolutely everywhere, but be everywhere that our perfect prospects are.
Yep.
That makes sense.
100%.
So how
Hmm.
does this fit into the conversations convert framework? How does that make sense altogether? And because I know that's kind of a cornerstone of the methodology, right? Like that's
Right.
the key. So
Yeah.
can you kind of walk us through maybe what the key principles would be like of that framework?
Right. So, one of the things I want to start with is that I think that people used to actually do this all the time. And I think a lot of us that were in this younger generation don't realize it because the older generation did it. And we grew up in this very virtual medium, right? And I think when we had 2020 came through and everything went really virtual, we really saw this go away. And you went into this mass marketing, this mass, everybody just throws everything at social media and it all became very generic and it's just screaming. And you, as a consumer, essentially just had to sit there and like your social media, you pretty well, if you were trying to find somebody, it's almost like you just like spin it like a wheel and then just wherever it stopped, you were just as good to try that person as the person that was five people above them, right?
Right.
Because it seemed like it was all the same stuff, just in a different font, and brand coloring. So, what used to happen? People used to take potential clients, the people they wanted to build relationships with as referral partners to be able to get more clients from, people they wanted to make sure that they were associated with to be able to build their authority by association. We took them to dinners. We took them for drinks. You took them to the golf course. You took them to all of these things. You courted them, right? When we went virtual, the idea of doing that became, where do you do that at? Where does that happen? Virtually, you can't really take someone to dinner. You can't
Right.
really take them to drinks. But when you did that, these people were getting to know you outside of just business. They were getting to know you as a person. They got to talk to you about a topic that you guys might find both interesting. You found commonalities, you found common ground, you found common values and morals and things along those lines that kind of brought you together. And then it was like, okay, yeah, this is a person I want to do business with. Yeah, we're going to close that deal, make the meeting with me next week, and we're going to sign that contract, right? And you might never have talked about business except for maybe the last 10 minutes of dinner, you
Yeah.
know? And that made a huge difference. And when we went virtual, a lot of that went away. And then right now, I don't know if you would agree with me, but I would say we are probably in one of the lowest trust markets ever when it comes to buying,
Agreed.
right? And a lot of that is I think a lot of missing some of that, from happening again. So for us, with what we do, we're bringing conversations back in. That's this is where we are. We're back to courting our clients again. And instead of taking them to dinner, we utilize the method of podcasting to do that.
Oh,
Okay. We're creating a room virtually where we can have those same kind of conversations again. When I'm telling somebody that we want to have a podcast for that business, we aren't selling on the podcast.
right.
That's not the thing. We've invited people in who are potential clients, potential strategic partners, authority builders, things like that. And we're having them come in and have these conversations and just talk, right? So then after that's over, we essentially that conversation's been had. We've had some value level conversations. We've found commonality. We've had whatever that topic might be. Now we've had all of that. Now after that interview is over with, this person is getting content, which is great for everybody this day and age, right? And be able to
Sure.
get free
Yeah.
content. They get a whole episode that they can cut up into pieces for themselves. They get social media clips, they get blogs, they have transcripts, they have, all of this stuff that's just given to them from it. So now there's a whole sense of goodwill that's been put out there, right? Um, and it's a really big, this kind of goes into that, a little bit of that more, I guess, like the marketing part. It's very much part of that, the nurture section of our sales process, right?
Sure.
And once that episode is over with, once you've had that, a couple things are going to happen there. One, you're going to find out, did I actually enjoy talking to this person? Is this somebody I actually want to do business with, or do I want to end this here and never talk to them again?
Sure. Yeah.
So you've already filtered that out.
Yeah.
If it is somebody, right, now you have, when you're in that conversation, you're also asking a few strategic questions as well. So you're kind of understanding what that person actually wants, right? You can ask little things. You're not really talking about business, but it's strategic conversations.
Yeah.
You're mining for information while you're in that conversation, right? So that you're taking notes kind of as you're talking about things. Maybe ask a little question over here about this, a little over here. What are their you can figure out what their pain points are. You can, things along those lines.
Yeah.
So you're getting context, around them. Um, you're figuring out when you're having these conversations, because you're having value conversations, you're having conversations that, show their morals and alignments and things like that. You're learning what motivates them, right? Um, and you're going to learn during that time too that even though you might think somebody might be qualified for you, during that conversation, you might realize that, like, okay, nope, this really isn't a qualified lead. I'm going to set that off to the side. This has been a good thing. They're going to get all of this stuff from me. It's going to be goodwill, but I'm not going to pursue that any further. Um, and then that turns, it ends up with a meaningful conversation. The conversation should end with clarity, right? So after that, you're defining the step. Did I decide that this is a person that I can convert into a client, that I can convert into a referral partner? If it is, at the end of that conversation, I'm going to say, hey, we were talking about XYZ over here. And I kind of think that, like, maybe I might be able to help you with something like that. Are you open to having this conversation with me and see how I might be able to help you? When you go into that, now you're into, and like I said, this works really well with the high ticket relationship driven sales. If you're willing to have that conversation with me, now you can have that. You're talking and you're pitching to a warm lead that already likes you before, you're just making this cold outreach, or you're just getting somebody that's over here just trying to question and figure out whether or not they need you, right?
Yeah.
So when you do that, these people have a really, really high conversion rate of either converting into clients or converting into referral partners that they end up getting client after client after client from.
Such an
So,
interesting thing. I wonder from the psychological perspective, how much of that is just letting somebody talk before they have to listen, right?
hmm
Because oftentimes in the modern world, we just spam people with our pitch, right?
hmm
Hey, how are you? You got a pulse?
Yeah,
Here's what I have, you know.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
so in your method, it's really giving them a chance to be the star
hmm
and then helping to support them as opposed to taking on that archetype of like, I'm the hero, I'm the great one that you should listen to. Instead, it's just kind of opening it up. I'd be really interested to see like the psychological side of that of how much what's going on in the brain there, you know, because
Yeah.
I know that oftentimes we're focused on this, you know, A plus B equals sales, but I'm
Yeah.
always wondering like what's going on in B's head, you know, like
Yeah.
how does
Yeah.
that that's
Yeah.
in,
Absolutely. I think a lot of it boils down to like everybody likes to feel special. Everybody likes to know that somebody is interested in them, you know. When you have them on that podcast, you did, just like you said, you've made them kind of the star. You've kind of made them, you're making them feel good. You're putting all of that good energy out there to them, and you're leaving that. I mean, you ever heard that people don't won't necessarily remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel?
yeah.
It's essentially that, you know? They might not remember everything you guys talked about in that conversation, but they are for sure going to remember, man, that guy over there, he, that was just an excellent I had a really good time there. I
Yeah.
felt great leaving that conversation. That means that I'm going to want to talk to that person again. I have a positive feeling, a positive emotion associated with you. So now I'm going to be more open and more receptive to the things that you have to say, to your opinions, to your suggestions. And I'm going to be way more likely to pay you a high ticket, to give you the high ticket sale versus Joe Blow over here that I don't know.
Yeah, that it's so obvious when you say it, but
Mm.
you know, for anybody who hasn't thought about it, this is
Yeah.
probably a little glass shattering for them.
Yeah.
So would the mic to money method that you have, is that kind of what we're already talking about, or is this a different framework that
No,
fits in? How does that fit?
so we have the framework that's kind of that conversation, the conversation conversion that's there, and that's what that mic to money is built around. So the mic
Okay.
to money method is that being the conversation conversion is something that we essentially do. Now, we do that through podcasting, but we also do that through a few other forms too that we have, which can be just small interview type situations where we're just like, hey, you talk about your business, I'm going to talk about my business, and we're just going to kind of like that back and forth. No pitching, just like, hey, let's just, almost like a one-to-one kind of situation, but like we're going to do it a few times and I'm going to let you talk about you and I'm going to talk about me and we're going to help each other go back and forth with the marketing, kind of situation. So there's some that can be done that way as well. So it can be used in other areas, but the mic to money method is where we really hone it into the podcasting very specifically. So I typically talk about it in the podcasting because when you're having a conversation with somebody about it, that just seems to like click the most and make the most sense. So, yeah.
Get it. So, uh, tell me, I mean, most of our members are either entrepreneurs or they're high performing individuals that are maybe thinking about being an entrepreneur,
hmm
and some that are just, you know, in management roles, things like that. And so let's kind of bring this from the theoretical into that real world example that we talked about at the beginning with, if that's okay to talk about. If
Yeah,
not, we can talk
sure.
about someone else. But the family law attorney that you worked with,
hmm
how did you help them to use these frameworks? And then what was the realistic time frame before they saw value out of that?
hmm So we kind of do this in a two-pronged approach, right? So I'll get into that as I explain kind of what we have going on here. So we have the family law attorney, but I also want to bring in another attorney that we worked with as well because I want to talk about both of them because of the fact that they approach utilizing this, but in two different ways. And both of them have been highly successful doing it in their own way. So the first one that I'll talk about is, and as you're going to go, I have Jonathan B and I have Jonathan H is the one. So the first thing we do when anybody comes in is we tell you that the first part of our strategy is a legal name change. You have to change it to Jonathan because the two most successful ones we have are Jonathans. So it can't be a coincidence, I'm sure.
Right.
Um, but um, but all right, so Jonathan B is the family law attorney, okay? And one of the things when we were working with him is that we had the core reality for him with his practice was that he can't identify an ideal client. You
Mm.
just don't know, right? I mean, like, who wants to go? What are you going to do? Sit there and be like, oh, look, that couple's arguing at dinner. Here's my card. Would you come on
Yeah.
to my podcast because I think you're going to need me soon? You know, nobody's going to do that. Um, but so getting an ideal client wasn't going to be what was going to work with him, right? What he needed was a strong referral network and he needed authority. Those were the two big things that he needed to focus on. So we knew no ideal clients. We need to build the referral network through this conversion process, and we need to build his authority. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing that we know is that everyone knows someone that is going to eventually need family law at some given point in time, typically, right? Somebody that's going to get divorced, somebody that needs a child custody issue or, whatever it might be. That could be anybody. So now we know we're not just looking for financial planners. We're not just looking for, this particular kind of person. It's an everybody. So how do we do that? Because it seems very broad. It's almost going exactly against what we said earlier. If you're trying to talk to everybody, you're talking to nobody, right?
Very
So
good.
like, how do we do this and make that make sense? The next thing that we realize is that like, okay, well, since we need to be talking to more of like the general public, there is no group of general public people that are going to want to sit and listen to a family law podcast and listen to people talk about, statutes and this and that all the time, right? So what we ended up doing was we positioned him as a community connector. And so he puts out an episode every week. 75% of his episodes highlights local businesses, nonprofits, and community leaders. He lets them shine and he's really engaged and makes them look amazing while he's on there, right? He's super into what they're doing. He's asking them about their business. How did you do this? How did you come into this? What are you working on? This, all of these things. And he is so focused on them. And it buys him a lot of goodwill and relational equity. So so that right there is bringing on a ton of people is building the referral network. But then he also is bringing on elected officials, respected community figures. You're talking state senators. He's bringing on the mayor, the sheriff, the county waterworks. Like all of these people, right, that are coming on there, and he's surrounding himself with high level people. So again, because he's around them all the time, it's bringing him to that same level, right? So he's building authority within the community because we don't just need him as an authority as he doesn't need to be the authority amongst lawyers. He needs to look like an authority amongst the people who would hire him, right? So you have to be very clear about that too. So he's surrounding himself with the people that his potential clients already view as authority, as higher level, right? So that is kind of how we've structured that. And so with that, he has kind of embedded himself into that community. And now anytime somebody ever says, "Hey, I need a family, I'm getting a divorce. I've got, I need something for child custody. Do you know somebody to do this?" He's that first name that pops up to everybody because he is literally just ingraining himself in all of these people's lives within this community, right? So not only is he doing that via the guest and using this as a guest conversion, right? Converting the guests, but he's also, because of that and how he's done it, he's grown his YouTube channel to like over 5,000 subscribers within that county. And that county is a rather small county. It's not very large. And so he's getting tons of views on his podcast. He's getting views on his shorts and clips in social media. Um, which is constantly getting him in front of more people, right?
Yeah.
So he's not only doing this now as the guest conversion, but he's got the other side of it that is the growing of the audience. We always start with guest conversion first because that's where your ROI is going to be seen first and fastest versus audience growth, which takes longer.
Sure.
Okay. When people start going in and, he probably started seeing, I think he was telling us probably within for him, probably about the first, he started really seeing it tick within probably about 5 months
Oh,
with the
wow.
guest conversion that he was seeing where people were starting to name him. Now, it was probably about a year before, you're talking probably about a year, little over a year before he was able to get his YouTube to start really, really going. And now I will say for him with his YouTube, he did personally decide to add a little bit of marketing money behind, what he was doing with social media to kind of help build that audience some. But that, because organic growth just takes time, it
Yeah.
takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
But that's why we focus on guest conversion over audience growth, right?
Smart.
And then the other attorney that we have is he's a business law attorney. He's very niche though. He tends to work, he's the lawyer's lawyer. So when lawyers need business attorneys, they go to him. Okay. So he's very niche. So his audience growth is not large because he doesn't need it to be. We don't need 10,000 views or 1,000 views of anybody because not just he's not serving just anybody. He's serving a very niche group of people.
Mhm.
So he averages probably about 400 views a week, downloads a week on his, and for his niche, that's perfect. Because it is so tight. But what he has done is because of his particular kind, he needed to work on who is his client? Who can he help? That's who he started bringing on as guests. Who were firms that he was starting to hear, hey, this over here, this one, I feel like this person's getting ready to do an exit. He's talking about wanting to start creating an exit plan of his firm. I need to have him on my show.
Yeah.
This one over here looks like, there is talk of mergers. Let me get him on my show. There's that, right? And he did, when we had done numbers several months ago, he had 94 episodes out. He told me he had converted probably 9 to 10 of those directly into paying clients for him. And he said probably about 75 of the others turned into referral partners that referred him paying clients.
Wow. That's,
And then, yeah, it's a good conversion rate.
yeah, it's big.
And then from that, one of the things that he has told me, which I think is very, very poignant for anybody who's doing this to hear, he has never landed a client from his own audience
Wow.
because he's always showcasing the guest. The guest is the one who is always being made to be the star and the expert. But because he had his own podcast, he's been invited. At that time, he had been invited onto like 12 other podcasts at that time. And he landed clients off of 10 of those audiences because he was now in the guest seat being made to be the expert. But he even said himself, he says, I never would have gotten those guest spots if I hadn't have already had my own.
Sure. Yeah.
So they're using this in this way, and that's how they're making these sales and these conversions. So that's how we kind of do this. That's two people in a very similar field using it in very different ways.
I'm glad you explained that because yeah, I mean there's definitely different ways to go about getting clients and particularly when it comes to content, but I don't know that there's two better examples of different ways to use it. So that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just due to time, I want to go ahead
Yeah.
and wrap up.
Sorry.
I know you got stuff
Yeah.
going on with your day. So kind of my final question here is for anybody that's watching this masterclass, whether it's live or they're just watching in the class vaults, what would be the like first step that they should take to actually start to put this into place and start building authority within their brand that they could take, the first action they could take right after this masterclass?
I think one of the first things is really to probably to audit your positioning.
Okay.
What are you doing? Like, what is your, really sit back and think about what what are you trying to say? What are you offering and who are you talking to? Because, like we said earlier, and I think it's kind of been a theme through some of this, if you're talking to everybody, or if you're trying to talk to everybody, you're talking to no one. Be specific. So, audit your positioning. When you're doing that, look at your website, look at your social profiles, look at the last 5 pieces of content that you've put out. Um, does this filter the right people in, and does it try to appeal to everyone? So that would be some of the first questions I would be asking. And then, choose a conversation. Um, choose one conversation this week and then approach it differently than maybe how you typically have. And instead of just explaining your services, ask questions of your people, of the people you're trying to work. Instead of pitching, start trying to qualify people. And instead of like talking more, listen. So just ask questions and spend this week asking questions and ask questions so much until you have so much confidence in what you've got going on and so much clarity in what your people need that you've just got the abundance of it to share with them.
I love that.
Know,
Yeah.
that they can borrow it because that authority-based selling, it's not starting with scripts and it's not starting with tips and tricks. It all starts with clarity. So I would say that's probably where I would start.
I love that. We've actually done a masterclass where we dove into 10 questions that sell more. And it's funny because they're not really like a sales script. They're really more of an interview process because that's really the way that this way I was taught sales was that a sales conversation is an interview. And so you're there to ask questions and all of that. But I realize more and more through the years that that is not how most people are taught sales. That is
No.
not
Yeah.
normal.
No.
Um,
Yeah. That typical sales that people are taught, like I have sworn that if hell was some sort of like a hell loop cycle of like the worst thing you could deal with, mine would be in that situation of sales.
yeah, I love
I hate that idea of it. So yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you on that one.
Man, that's funny. So, yeah, okay. Well, I think that at some point you have to come back because I have so much more that I want to talk to you about. I took a ton of
Awesome.
notes too, so I learned a bunch from this, and so I really genuinely appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you.
But I do want to get you off of here so that you can go back to your day.
Sure.
And if anybody is watching and they want to get in touch with you, I know we don't have you in the directory yet. By the time somebody watches, you may be listed in the directory, but how could they get in touch with you to learn more about this, to talk about, their strategy and really to figure out how to become an authority in their own world?
Yeah, so we have our website, which is www.cypressmediaproductions.com, or they can email me at Brooke, Brooke, at cypressmediaproductions.com.
Easy enough. And obviously, if they want to see some of your work, they could find it online on any of the
They can find
channels,
it
I would
online.
assume.
Well,
Yeah,
if they go on to our website, we have a tab that says client podcasts, and there's some of those that are on there too. So you go to that, and it'll take you to a networking podcast page that has some of our clients all over it. So, and you can get to
perfect.
their podcasts. Hmm.
Makes it easy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for today. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Whether you're watching live or you're in the class vaults, just watching the replay, if you have questions, comments, or concerns, just drop them in the comments right below or bring this conversation into the mastermind. In the sales channel, we can talk about this. I can connect you with Brooke and we can continue to develop your strategy to help you raise your authority, raise your credibility, and ultimately end up selling more. So that's it for today. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. We will see you tomorrow and then see you inside of the mastermind.